Hello, and welcome back to a special deep dive masterclass from English Active Listening. I'm your host, Alyssa, and I've got to say, I'm truly delighted that you have decided to dedicate this time to yourself and to your English journey today. I want you to think of our time together not as just another lesson, but as our own private workshop. A safe, supportive, and encouraging space for you to explore and understand one of the most desired and, let's be honest, one of the most frustrating goals for every single language learner: the goal of achieving English speaking fluency. Before we dive in, I want you to take a moment to just check in with yourself. Acknowledge where you are right now. You're most likely at what we call the B1, or intermediate level of English, and that in itself is a huge achievement. Seriously, give yourself a pat on the back for all the hard work and dedication that has brought you this far. The B1 level is a really interesting place to be, but it can also be a bit tricky. It's that specific stage where your understanding has just exploded. You can watch English movies and pretty much get the main story. You can listen to podcasts like this one and follow the key ideas. You can read articles and you get the gist of what's being said. Your mind holds a great deal of English knowledge. Your vocabulary is solid and you've got a decent handle on grammar. But then, the moment comes when you need to speak. And maybe in that moment, you feel like you've completely hit a wall. You know, that frustrating feeling when you just can't seem to make any more progress. It's like you're standing on a wide, flat plateau. You can see the beautiful mountain peak of fluency in the distance, shining in the sun. But you feel like you've stopped climbing. You're just not sure which path to take to start moving upwards again. In a conversation, the words you know so well suddenly seem to vanish. The sentences you try to form in your head feel clumsy or just wrong. And when you're talking with a native speaker, the conversation seems to move a mile a minute. And by the time you've put together your perfect sentence, the topic has already jumped to something else entirely. Does any of that ring a bell? If you're nodding your head right now, I want to reassure you of two incredibly important things. First off, you are not alone. This B1 plateau is probably the most common, most shared experience for every single successful English learner. It is a completely natural stage of the journey. And second, you are not stuck. You just need a new perspective and a new set of tools to get you moving again. Today, our entire focus is on giving you that fresh perspective and those new tools. We are going to learn how to leave this plateau behind and start that climb towards the peak of fluency, not with stress, but with a real sense of joy and confidence. So let's get on the same page about what this thing we call fluency actually is. I think it's essential that we start by tearing down the old, stressful definition that so many learners carry around like a heavy weight on their shoulders. This incorrect definition is often the very thing that holds people back. So let's be crystal clear about what fluency is not. Fluency is not about being perfect. It is not about reaching some mythical point where you never make a single grammar mistake. Trust me, as a native English speaker, I make little mistakes all the time. I'll use the wrong word or start a sentence and forget where I was going with it. It's just a normal part of being human and communicating. Chasing perfection is like chasing the horizon. It's a game you can't win, and it will only leave you feeling exhausted and disappointed. Fluency is also not about speaking lightning fast. Speed is not a measure of quality. I'm sure you've met native speakers who talk a mile a minute and are actually pretty hard to understand. Clarity is always more important than speed. And it's definitely not about knowing every single word in the English dictionary. That's just impossible. Fluency is about being effective and creative with the words you do know. And finally, fluency is not about erasing your accent. Your accent is a part of your identity. It tells the beautiful story of where you come from and the other languages you master. The real goal isn't to sound like me or any other native speaker. It's to have clear pronunciation so that people can understand the wonderful ideas you want to share. So if fluency isn't about being a perfect, fast-talking, walking dictionary, what is it? I believe real, achievable fluency is built on 3 simple, powerful pillars. Let's call them the 3 C's: confidence, clarity, and connection. Confidence. That's the inner feeling that gives you the courage to open your mouth and speak, even when you know you might not be perfect. It's that self-trust, that belief that you have enough English to get your message across. It's about finding freedom from that nagging fear of judgment. Clarity. This is your ability to express your thoughts in a way that the other person can understand without a huge amount of effort. It means your pronunciation is clear enough, your grammar is good enough, and your choice of words is effective enough to get your message across. It's not about perfection, it's about being understandable. And finally, connection. This is the magic that happens when you use your language to build a bridge to another person. It's your ability to manage the back and forth rhythm of a conversation, to listen and respond, to ask and answer, to share a story, and to understand someone else's. Confidence, clarity, and connection. This is our new, healthier, and way more achievable definition of fluency. This is the beautiful mountain peak we're climbing towards. And the best news of all? Fluency, defined in this way, is not some magical talent you're born with. It is a skill. And like any skill, from playing the guitar to learning to cook, it can be learned, practiced, and mastered. So once we've got our heads in the right space, once we're feeling a bit more chill about making mistakes, where do we actually start? Well, it might surprise you, but the journey to fluent speaking kicks off with your ears. I like to think of becoming fluent as being like becoming a gardener. You can't just throw seeds on hard, dry ground and expect a beautiful garden to grow. You have to prepare the environment first. You have to cultivate the soil. In our case, that soil is your mind. And the water and sunlight, the essential nutrients for growth, come from listening. This is why our first practical foundation is all about your input engine. This is the heart of our philosophy here at English Active Listening. The journey to fluent speaking doesn't begin in your mouth. It begins in your ears and in your brain. There's a well-known idea in language learning, which, long story short, basically says that to produce language fluently, you must first absorb a massive amount of understandable language. Think of your brain as the soil in your garden. Every time you engage in active listening, you're adding rich nutrients, compost, and water to that soil. You can't expect beautiful, strong plants, your spoken words, to grow from soil that is dry and nutrient poor. Speaking is the harvest. Listening is the cultivation. You cannot have a bountiful harvest without first patiently and consistently cultivating the soil. As a B1 learner, you've already done a lot of listening. But now it's time to upgrade how you listen. It's time to switch from being a passive hearer to an active gardener. A gardener doesn't just randomly throw water around. They water with purpose. Your purpose is to listen for the things that will directly feed your future speech. The two most important nutrients you can listen for are chunks and signposts. Let's do a deep dive into chunking. We've talked about this before, but it is so important that we really need to break it down. We, as native speakers, don't communicate by choosing one word at a time from a mental dictionary and then trying to arrange them with grammar rules. Our brains just don't work that fast. Instead, we speak using these chunks, groups of words that are stored together in our memory as a single unit. Your new mission is to become a chunk collector. I want you to start categorizing the chunks you find, because different chunks do different jobs in a conversation. Let's think about some of these categories. First up, we have conversational openers. These are the chunks that help you jump into a conversation or start talking about a topic. Think of them like the key to your car's ignition. For example, as for me, speaking of which, that reminds me of, or in my experience, these are signals that you're about to share something personal. Next, we have linking ideas. These chunks are the bridges that connect your thoughts together smoothly. Without them, your speaking can sound a bit robotic, like a list of simple, disconnected sentences. Some brilliant examples are, on top of that, which you use to add another point. As a result, to show a consequence. On the other hand, to show a contrast or a different perspective. Or, in other words, which is perfect for rephrasing an idea to make it clearer. Getting the hang of these linking chunks will instantly make your speaking sound more sophisticated and logical. Then there are the essential chunks for opinion and agreement. These are the lifeblood of any good chat. Instead of just saying, "I think," over and over again, you can use richer, more interesting chunks like, "From my point of view," "The way I see it is," or "As far as I'm concerned." And when you agree with someone, instead of a simple "yes," you can show enthusiastic agreement with phrases like, "I couldn't agree more. That's exactly what I was thinking." Or a great idiom, "You've hit the nail on the head." And what about when you disagree? You can do it politely with powerful chunks like, "I see where you're coming from, but I take your point, but have you considered?" Or, "I'm not so sure about that." Your task is to create a chunk notebook. It can be a physical notebook or a file on your phone with these categories. Every time you listen to a podcast, watch an interview, or follow a movie, listen for these chunks. When you hear a good one, pause and write it down in the correct category. Just this simple act of noticing, identifying, and writing them down begins the process of moving them from a sound you hear into a tool you can use. Now let's talk about listening for signposts. Signpost language is what skilled speakers use to guide their listeners through what they're saying. They are just like road signs on a highway. They tell you where you are, where you're going, and what's coming up next. When you start to recognize these signposts, two things happen. First, your comprehension improves dramatically because you can predict the structure of what the person is saying. And second, you learn the framework for structuring your own speech when you need to speak for a longer time, like in a meeting or when you're telling a story. Let me give you some examples of these signposts. To introduce a topic, a speaker might say, "What I want to talk about today is," or "the main point I want to get across is." To structure their ideas, they might use signposts like, "There are a couple of things I want to mention. Firstly, ... moving on to my next point." Or, another important aspect to consider is, To give an example, they'll use clear signs like, "To give you an example," or a very common one, for instance. And to conclude, they'll signal the end is near with phrases like, "So, in conclusion," "To sum up," or "So, to wrap things up." When you listen, start tuning your ear to these structural cues. Notice how a good speaker guides you. They don't just throw information at you. They lead you on a clear, easy-to-follow journey. By recognizing the map they're using, you can learn to draw your own map when it's your turn to speak. This active listening for structure is an incredibly powerful skill that will elevate both your listening and your speaking abilities. The input engine is all about conscious, purposeful listening. It's about filling your mental bank with the currency of fluency. Chunks and structural signposts. This is the most important investment you can make in your speaking journey. So once the soil of our mind is prepared, and we've been enriching it with the water and sunlight of active listening, it's time to focus on the seeds and the sprouts. The output mechanism that takes our thoughts and turns them into spoken words. This is often where the B1 plateau feels the most real. The knowledge is in your brain, the soil is rich, but the seeds just don't seem to be growing properly. There seems to be a disconnect, a sort of traffic jam between your mind and your mouth. This traffic jam is almost always caused by one single habit, a habit we need to gently break. Thinking in your native language and translating in your head. Let's be really honest about this. Escaping the translation trap is the single most critical step in activating your fluency. Translating is an incredibly complex mental task. When you're trying to have a conversation, your brain is already working hard, listening to the other person and understanding their meaning. If you then add the extra jobs of forming a sentence in your own language, searching for equivalent words, and then reassembling it all according to English grammar rules, well, you're putting your brain under immense pressure. It's like trying to juggle, ride a unicycle, and sing an opera all at the same time. It's no wonder it feels slow and difficult. Our goal is to create a direct highway from an idea to English speech, completely bypassing that slow, stressful translation department in your head. And we can do this with two incredibly practical techniques: the thinking in English ladder and the sentence skeleton method. First, let's explore the thinking in English ladder. This is a structured exercise you can do by yourself, anytime, anywhere. It's a way to build new neural pathways in your brain, essentially making English a more natural and comfortable language for your thoughts to live in. We'll approach it in levels, like climbing a ladder, starting very simply. Level 1 is the word level. This is the very first rung, and it's incredibly easy. For 5 minutes a day, just look at the objects around you and name them in your head, in English. Don't build sentences, just the words. Chair table, window, lamp, book, pen. This creates a direct link between the physical object and the English word, with no middleman, no translation. You're just warming up your brain. Level 2 is the simple sentence level. Now you start to narrate your own actions in very simple, present tense sentences. As you make your breakfast, your internal monologue, that little voice in your head should be in English. I'm walking to the kitchen. I'm opening the fridge. I see the milk and the eggs. I'm taking out the milk. Now I'm closing the fridge. I need a glass. I'm getting a glass from the cupboard. I am pouring the milk into the glass. This might feel a bit silly or overly simple at first, but trust me, it is profoundly effective. You are training your brain to associate actions and sequences with English sentence structures automatically. It reminds me of a time when I was learning Spanish. I was living in a small town in Spain, and I felt like I'd hit a wall. I could understand people, but my speaking was slow and clumsy. My teacher gave me this exact advice. She said, "Alyssa, for 1 week, I want you to be the narrator of your own movie." So I did it. I felt ridiculous at first, walking down the street thinking to myself in my broken Spanish, "Estoy caminando. Veo un perro. El perro es grande." I am walking. I see a dog. The dog is big. But after a few days, something amazing happened. I was in a little shop, and the owner asked me a simple question. And without thinking, without planning, without translating, an answer just came out of my mouth. It was a simple sentence, but it was smooth and it was automatic. It was the first time I had ever spoken without that stressful translation delay. That was my aha moment. That was when I truly understood that this simple, private narration was actually rewiring my brain. That's what level 2 does. And once you get the hang of it, you move to level 3, the descriptive level. Now you start describing the world around you in your mind. Look out the window and describe the scene with more detail. I see a park. There are many tall, green trees. A man in a red jacket is walking his dog. The dog is small and white, and it's pulling on the leash. Some children are laughing and playing on the swings. They look happy. The sky is mostly blue, but there are a few fluffy clouds moving slowly. You are moving from simple actions to more complex observations, building your descriptive vocabulary and your sentence variety. Then you climb to level 4, the opinion level. This is the top rung of our ladder for today. This is where you have a silent conversation or a debate with yourself in English. You read a news headline. Then you take a moment and you formulate your opinion in your head. Okay, so the article is about building a new high-speed train line. From my point of view, this is a fantastic idea because it could reduce traffic and pollution. On the other hand, I can see that it would be incredibly expensive, and it might disrupt the communities it passes through. But I guess at the end of the day, I think the long-term environmental benefits probably outweigh the short-term costs. By doing this, you're practicing the high-level skill of forming and structuring arguments entirely in English. Climbing this ladder, even for just 15 minutes a day, will fundamentally change how your brain processes English. The second technique for firing up your output engine is the sentence skeleton method. This is a brilliant shortcut that helps you build grammatically correct and sophisticated sentences without the stress of constructing them from scratch every single time. The idea is to have a collection of flexible sentence structures that you can use in many different situations. You just need to add the meat, your specific ideas and words. Let me give you some examples of these powerful skeletons. A fantastic one for making a comparison uses the word while. For instance, you could say, "While coffee is great for energy, tea is much better for relaxing." Or for another comparison, "While living in a big city is exciting, living in the countryside is more peaceful." You see how that structure gives you a perfect way to compare two things? Another really useful skeleton helps you talk about cause and effect using the phrase "because of." It's simple but so effective. For example, you might say, "Because of the unexpected train strike, I was late for my meeting." Or, "Because of her positive attitude, She is a pleasure to work with. And for talking about your experiences, there's a wonderful skeleton that starts with one of the most. You can adapt it to fit any story. For instance, you could share. One of the most memorable things I've ever eaten was a curry I had in Thailand. Or for a different kind of experience. One of the most challenging things I've ever done was when I ran a half marathon. Your task is to become a collector of these skeletons. When you're reading or listening, pay attention to these useful, recurring sentence structures. Write them down in your notebook. Then you've got to practice them. Take one skeleton and just play with it by making 5 or 10 different sentences. For example, you could take the structure that uses even though and just practice saying different things. Like, even though it was raining heavily, I still went for my run. Or, even though the movie got bad reviews, I still really enjoyed it. Or maybe, even though I was incredibly nervous, I still gave the presentation. By practicing with these skeletons, you are programming your brain with a toolbox of reliable, high-quality structures. In a real conversation, when you need to express a comparison or an experience, you won't have to panic. Your brain will have a ready-made skeleton waiting for you. All you need to do is add your words. This dramatically reduces your mental load, boosts your speaking speed, and makes you sound much more fluent. So, we've filled our fuel tank with the input engine, and we've built a powerful output mechanism. The car is running beautifully, but now we have to learn to drive it in traffic. Fluency in the real world isn't about giving a perfect speech in an empty room. It's about the art of interaction. It's about gracefully managing the sometimes messy, unpredictable dance of a live conversation. This is our final practical foundation. And the goal here is simple. Connection over perfection. It's about using your English to connect with another human being. And we will learn 2 simple but profound techniques for this. Mastering conversational fillers and the echo and expand method. First, let's master the art of conversational fillers. As we've touched on, these little words and sounds, let me see, are not your enemies. They are your best friends. Many learners think they are mistakes and try to eliminate them. Please don't do this. Native speakers use them constantly. They are essential tools for managing a conversation, like the oil that keeps the engine running smoothly. I want you to start thinking of them in different categories. First, you have your hesitation fillers. Their job is to buy you time to think. When someone asks you a difficult question, a dead silence can feel very long and awkward. But a hesitation filler signals that you are processing. The most useful ones are, let me see. Or my favorite, that's a good question. Using one of these gives you 2 or 3 precious seconds to gather your thoughts without breaking the flow of the conversation. Then you have your structuring fillers. These are often used at the very beginning of a response to help you organize what you're about to say. The most common and useful are, well, so, and right. Starting your answer with well is an incredibly natural way to lead into an opinion or an explanation. So, is great for starting a conclusion or a next step. Finally, there are engagement fillers. These are little questions you can add to the end of your sentences to check if the other person is following you and to invite them to respond. The most common is, For example, it's a really great restaurant, but it can be a bit expensive, This little tag makes the statement feel more collaborative and less like a formal declaration. Another one is, if that makes sense, which is perfect when you're explaining something a bit complex. Your mission is to consciously start using one or two of these. Don't try to use them all at once. Just pick one. Maybe start with well ... It's simple, natural, and you can use it almost anywhere. By embracing fillers, you give yourself permission to think. You sound more natural, and you dramatically reduce the stress of feeling you have to speak in perfect, uninterrupted sentences. Our second technique for brilliant interaction is what I call the echo and expand method. This is a powerful strategy for being an active, engaged conversation partner, which cleverly takes the pressure off you to always be thinking of something new and interesting to say. It has two simple steps. Step 1 is to echo. When your conversation partner says something, you lightly echo a key word or phrase they just used. You're not repeating their whole sentence like a parrot. You're just picking up on 1 to 3 key words. This does two amazing things at once. It proves to the other person that you were really listening to them, which makes them feel great, and it gives your own brain a specific topic to focus on. For example, if your friend says, "I just got back from a wonderful trip to the mountains in Italy," your echo could be, "Oh, the mountains in Italy? Wow." Step 2 is to expand. Immediately after your echo, you ask an open-ended question based on the words you just echoed. So, following our example, after "the mountains in Italy?" Wow. Your expand question could be, "What was the most beautiful part of the trip?" Or, "How was the food up there?" Let's just look at that interaction. Your friend introduced the topic. All you had to do was echo a small part of it, and then ask a simple question. You have kept the conversation moving forward beautifully. You have shown that you are a fantastic listener, and you have taken all the pressure off yourself. The echo and expand method is a simple, repeatable strategy that can carry you through any conversation with confidence and grace. And so, we've traveled a long way together in our masterclass today. We started by rebuilding our mindset, letting go of that myth of perfection, and embracing our new identity as confident users and communicators. We explored the input engine, learning to become active listeners who hunt for valuable chunks and signposts. We moved to the output mechanism, where we learned how to escape the translation trap by climbing the thinking in English ladder and building with sentence skeletons. And finally, we learned the art of interaction, mastering fillers and the echo and expand method to connect with others confidently. You now have a complete toolkit, a comprehensive strategy for leaving that B1 plateau far behind you and climbing towards your goal of fluency. But this knowledge, by itself, is not enough. The final, most important ingredient, the one that makes everything else work, is habit. Fluency is not born from one single, heroic effort. It is the result of small, intelligent, and consistent actions repeated over time. I encourage you to create your own personal fluency workout plan based on the ideas we discussed today. Dedicate just 20 to 30 minutes a day to this focused practice. That's all it takes. Maybe on Mondays and Wednesdays, you focus on your input engine, doing some active listening. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, you work on your output mechanism, climbing the thinking ladder and practicing with your sentence skeletons. On Fridays, you could practice the art of interaction, maybe having a real conversation with a language partner, or even an imaginary one with yourself. And on the weekends, please, just enjoy English. Watch that movie without stressing about understanding every word. Listen to that music. Read that blog about your favorite hobby. Let English be a source of pleasure and joy, not just a subject of study. Commit to this process. See it as a fascinating project about your own mind. Be curious about your progress. Be patient with yourself on the days it feels difficult, because those days will come. And most importantly, remember to look back every few weeks and celebrate how far you have come. The journey to fluency is one of the most rewarding adventures you can undertake. It opens up not just new conversations, but new friendships, new cultures, new ideas, and new ways of seeing the world. Thank you for joining me for this deep dive masterclass from English Active Listening. I hope you feel inspired, empowered, and, most of all, clear on the steps you can now take. Your goal of speaking English with confidence, clarity, and the ability to connect is not a distant, impossible dream. It is a skill, and you now have the tools to build it. If you found this masterclass helpful, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and please turn on the bell notification so you won't miss our next episode, where we'll continue this journey together. Until then, keep listening, keep practicing, and be incredibly kind to yourself on this wonderful journey. This is Alyssa, wishing you all the best. Goodbye for now.